I guess our philosophy is that change of any form is not possible unless you have self-awareness and unless you have ownership and take responsibility for the situation. So if you're not hitting metrics at work, you've got to take responsibility for that yourself and not blame it on everything else and everyone else. Of course, there are things that happen that are out of our control, but the opportunity to reflect with the mindset of I am responsible for the outcomes that happened today, that I have created them in some way. When you reflect in that way and you're looking for the lessons, what happened, why, what could I have done better, but also what went well, how did I actually, because all these things happen that were beyond my control, of the responses that I did in my actions today, what was effective? These are all really powerful things to reflect on.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm Kylie Walker. Thank you so much for being here. Now, in this episode, we are going to delve into the latest trends, research, and insights impacting the property management industry. And I think it's going to be a fairly fascinating episode lined up for you from someone who is way smarter than me. We'll be exploring the critical topics of well-being, burnout, and productivity within the realm of property management. These are issues that resonate deeply with many of us, myself included, as the demands of the industry continue to grow and evolve. Property managers often face a unique set of challenges. The constant juggling act can lead to significant stress, burnout, and ultimately loss of productivity. This not only impacts the well-being of the managers themselves, but has a ripple-on effect on the businesses as well. High turnover rates, decreased efficiency, and lowered morale can severely affect the bottom line and overall success of a company. Now, to help us navigate this important discussion, I'm thrilled to introduce my special guest, Stuart Hayes. Stuart is the visionary founder and director of HD&U, a leading consultancy based in Melbourne. I actually met Stuart at a retreat earlier this year, and he was one of the keynote speakers as well as being a guest on the retreat. And his wealth of knowledge, he is an academic, but he is also a little bit woo-woo. And I absolutely love how grounded and motivational and inspirational Stuart is. So I was super excited when he agreed to come and share his expertise on this podcast. Now, he's got an impressive career that spans over 3 decades. He brings a wealth, like I said, a wealth of knowledge and experience to this conversation. His expertise is in strategy, leadership, and operational excellence, and he has guided countless businesses around the world towards success, making him a highly respected figure in the industry. Stuart's dedication to enhancing workplace wellbeing and productivity, coupled with his hands-on experience in property management, offers us a unique perspective on how to tackle burnout and foster a healthier work environment. He understands firsthand how the pressures of property management can lead to major issues and how critical it is for business owners to address these issues head-on to maintain a thriving and productive team. He's also conducted his own research on the struggles property managers and business owners face in the industry and has come up with some solutions to help us navigate and transform from our current state. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, then stick around and take a listen. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me on the Property Management Podcast. Before we dive in, can you share with our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started doing what you're doing?
Thanks, Kylie. It's great to be here. That's the obvious question I knew you were probably going to ask me, and I haven't even really thought about it. But I guess the backstory is that I started my career in consulting, and at the time, the type of consulting that I did was, I guess you'd call us the emergency room of business. So when a business was going poorly or it was unhealthy, much the same way as we might trot along to the ER with our kids and sit there and wait, we would get involved and identify and diagnose whatever the problem was, and then get about actually fixing it. And in time, I guess, and even to this day, that's sort of always been the theme of the work I've done, is trying to really understand, not from just a gut feel opinion, but actually looking at the data and really understanding what the predicament is that the business faces, which includes the people, and then going about fixing it. And in my journey from those original days, I ended up becoming a CEO who specialized in fixing these type of problems within private businesses. And I had the privilege of traveling around the world to many countries, running companies. And ultimately what I found was that even with the wrong people in an organization, if I could protect the people from stress, which often meant protecting them from each other, and certainly often from the owners and the creditors and the clients, that even with the wrong people, we could perform extraordinary outcomes and turn around any problem, any business at any time. And I guess probably one of my proudest achievements in my career is that as a CEO over 15 years, I had a 100% success rate in saving and turning around companies.
Amazing.
What I do now, I've been doing for 14 years, and I love what I do. I guess we can talk a little bit more about that later, but that's sort of how the backstory was anyway.
Amazing. That is fantastic. So maybe just before we dive into some of your research and some of the stuff that you're doing, and I know you work with a lot of real estate businesses as part of your clientele, maybe talk to us about some of those issues and struggles that many businesses have. I mean, I'm sure they're the same problems that most businesses, there'd be, a handful of problems that are all the same across most businesses, across most industries. So maybe talk us a little bit about those issues that businesses face.
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. And I guess the short answer is that the biggest problem is poor management and poor leadership. And I think that in Australia, we unfortunately are very overmanaged and very underled. And I distinguish between the two in a simple way, I guess, that if you're relying on your authority and you're using just processes and controls to get things done, then you're managing. However, if people are doing what you would really want them to do by choice, that's when you're leading. And that's sort of the predicament that we face everywhere from Canberra to small boardrooms in small companies all over Australia. So if we go further from that, the types that arise when you are not leading well ultimately extend into the more practical side of business. Because it's not just about the topic of leadership that's the problem. It's actually all the individual granular pieces of a company, like cash flow. How do you make sure that you've got enough cash that's being generated by the business week in and week out, that you're going to be able to pay every single obligation in the future at the time it's due? And it might sound like it's an obvious thing to focus on, but as an illustration, across real estate, we almost find no agencies really have a great handle on that. So we built some really simple tools to help agencies precisely understand what their bank balance will be in the future. So they know what they can draw out as owners, they know what they can do, they know what they can spend on branding, on all types of things, with precise knowledge of how that's going to impact their cash flow. Another area that businesses of all shapes and sizes, not just in real estate, don't really understand is their people. So yes, we all like to say that our people are our greatest resource, but actually we pretty much measure the wrong things about our people all the time. So we developed a series of tools that help us measure things like confidence. We developed algorithms that help measure a whole range of different stressors. So we can tell in advance of when someone is becoming a risk of a breakdown that they are. And
Wow.
our aim is to avert that. So, the way we do that is simple but complex, and I guess a little bit unique. But the point is that everything that we do is designed to help leaders lead their businesses exceptionally well by giving them the data they probably don't have access to, by giving them tools to help make better decisions. Sure, we also do leadership training and development and things like that. But generally speaking, I find that most people in senior roles are doing a reasonable job. It's just they don't have all the tools at hand, and they don't necessarily have the time or space to reflect on alternative ways to do things. So they just sort of follow what they experienced when they were younger, and there's just better ways to do things. We see that all the time.
I really like that you don't just tell, like lots of people just tell businesses, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. But you're right, a lot of us don't have the time to actually then go and, work out how to implement
Execute.
that. Or so if you've got a tool that we can just plug into the business, that's such an advantage, because there are lots of things out there that we should be doing.
I
But
know that's a really astute observation you've made, Kylie. It's so, I started my career at KPMG, which is a big global consulting firm, but my specialty was in private business. And there's a little bit of a misconnect there, because you think of KPMG as this massive juggernaut, and it was, and it still is. But the big problem is when you get into smaller businesses, that when one single dynamic changes, it could be the loss of a really experienced property manager. As most agency owners will know, if you don't really act swiftly to resolve that problem, then things can unravel really quickly. Whereas at the big end of town, you have a lot longer to deal with a problem that arises. So, for the past 20 years of my life, I've been dedicated specifically in the smaller business area. And that observation you made is absolutely 100% correct, because of those reasons, because you have to jump on things urgently, and you have to understand that as the owner of a small business, you probably have no time. So if someone just comes along and says, here's a big shopping list of things you should do, there's normally two problems with that. Number one, every business is different, and there is no silver bullet. So, we're always a bit cautious when we find consultants, me as well, who might come along and go, here's what you need to do, and they leave. So our approach is actually to really understand the way the business and the team is organized, how things are actually happening, and then provide very targeted solutions that fit around what they're already doing. So it's not a new thing to be done. It's actually just a better way of doing what they're already doing, which ideally will free up time for the owner, in time. But the plugging in of different tools, that really helps, and I guess with real estate specifically, it's quite a simple industry in many ways. So we can make some tools that are a little bit silver bullety. They are a bit able to be applied across a lot of agencies because of the way that the industry is organised.
beautiful. We'll dive into some of those solutions and tools later. But for now, let's start. Tell me about some of this research that you've done, specifically relating to property management and the productivity, the wellness, the burnout side of things, which is so prevalent in the industry.
Yeah, look, it's probably my absolute favourite topic in the world, to be honest. Hence I've taken my studies outside of professional work back into academia as well. We've all heard about the wellness issues with property managers in particular. Going through COVID, having various state governments change residential tenancy acts, being asked to do some horrible things. Being stuck between tenants and landlords and feeling like they were letting both sides down. Just a complete disaster of a period of time, and ultimately led to an extraordinary number of property managers deciding to leave the industry, which has left us in a situation where finding experienced property managers today is really challenging. So what we found is that in the property management sector, that there's a real overlay or an overlap with what's also happening in aged care in that sense, curiously. So in aged care at the same time, during COVID in particular, there was a whole lot of very onerous obligations put on aged care workers because of government regulations, because of restrictions, etc., and also because they were not necessarily appreciated by either the clients, which in property management is like our landlords, or their families and or the facilities they work for, which in some senses is like they're probably like the tenants, and the landlords are probably like the facilities, I guess. So what we started to do was to measure, using our software across a large number of property managers, what people were feeling week in and week out. So we monitor about 90 different psychosocial stressors using our software, and we do that specifically to help improve the experience of work of the property managers, because at the end of the day, experience of work is actually where it all comes together. Every component of your job, from your micromanaging boss to your grumpy tenants to your overbearing landlord, to the way that your particular agency's systems and processes require you to resolve those things, to capture information, callback cycles, business development and everything. All those things come together to form your experience of work, along with whatever level of cultural benefit or perhaps uglier behaviour that might exist within the team you work with. So there was a really fabulous bit of research done in the Netherlands back about 20 years ago called the Job Demands and Resources Theory. And it underpins a big chunk of what we do. So what this theory showed was that someone's performance in their job is a function of actually only two things. The first thing is how engaged they are. And how engaged you are is very much a component of all the good things that your company, your boss, your team make available to you to help you in your job. Training, good systems, going to ARIC, going to different functions and conferences, staff-based initiatives, etc. Right? On the other side, the second thing that leads to your job performance is your level of exhaustion. So what leads to exhaustion is the demands of your job. And the demands can actually arise from some of the things I just mentioned. So for example, we might have training, but if the training that we are required to do just gives us a whole list of extra things that we have to build into our job, it hasn't really helped. Over-management, micromanagement, toxic, all the psychosocial stressors around work, from lack of clarity to bullying, harassment. And if you're talking to property managers, it's not a matter of have you ever been, a victim of some of these awkward, terrible behaviours. It's actually when was the last time.
Oh, I can relate to all of them. I'm picturing faces and people, and and looking at myself as well. Yeah, so I can relate to all of them.
When we were doing this research, one of the organisations we were with, it was an agency in Melbourne, and they were in a crisis. So the owner of this organisation had 3 different agencies that were following the same sort of trail of disaster in the property management team with their experience of work. So we had a look at them and we gave advice and said, look, we actually think you need to do the same thing across all 3. And this guy said, I'll let you do 1. So we did 1, and in the short period we worked with them, we started measuring all these things, which informed what happened next. And it was all about reducing the demands of work so that we could reduce the exhaustion, and then with lower exhaustion, they already had a whole bunch of things on the positive side, but the benefit of those was basically limited. I mean, it's like, I guess, if you were working in an emergency department of a hospital and you've got the greatest culture in the world and everyone gets really along fabulously well and you've got state-of-the-art equipment and all that stuff is fantastic, but you're asked to see an extra 100 people an hour, unless we can change that, getting to go to an extra conference doesn't help. Having a little bit of extra training, a bonus, a team dinner has no difference. Being given the chance to learn about wellness, having an EAP program, doing meditation, these things don't help, right? What they are actually saying is that we're accepting you're going to get stressed and exhausted, and so we're going to give you things to help you deal with exhaustion. Whereas the most effective way to improve someone's experience of work is to reduce the demands of their job, which lowers their exhaustion. And then all the good things they've got available have much more impact.
So my question is, then how do, obviously, especially for small businesses, and I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to reduce the demands, I'm going to have to get more support. I'm going to have to take less properties off you, which means I'm going to have to get another person in the business. Is that how or maybe the question I'm going to ask you is, what do we do to reduce those demands without it potentially, costing us more money or more manpower?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I guess there's different ways to run property management teams. Some of them, the answer would be you'd have to employ more staff. But we always, as I mentioned earlier, we'll always try to start with whatever the dynamic is within the way the team already operates. So, let's contrast this, for example. In some property management organisations, you're going to have some people who deal with landlords, others who do inspections, and others who deal with tenants or deal with documentation, and they keep them separate.
That's exactly how I run my business. Yep.
Yeah. Whereas the alternative and more common model is that one person has somewhere between 120 to 200 properties they manage and does all of those things for all of those properties. So if they go away, or if they're unwell, or if there's just a bit of an unfortunate...
They're burnt out and exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, if there's just a bad day, like a rainstorm, right, or whatever, and suddenly 20 tenants and 20 landlords are trying to reach them on the same day, they have no space. Now, one of the single best things you can do to improve someone's well-being is to give them what's called deep work, or make available time in their day for deep work. So deep work is basically where we have enough space where we're going to be uninterrupted to just work through what's in front of us and to get things done. I think that's one of the best things about being at home and working from home more frequently, that we can sort of more control that in most professions, but a lot of property managers can't, because when the phone rings, they're expected to answer the phone. So in those type of agencies, one of the key things is learning to, or is facilitating the team being able to rely upon each other to give each other that space, even if it's only for 3 or 4 little buckets of 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
To start with, just to say, hey, I need to go away and do this. Can you guys just cover me, please? And no matter who calls, having the confidence that your team will rally around you to protect you so you don't have to deal with it. And you can just be fully present to the work you're doing. And as much as women are much better at multitasking than guys are, it's still really stressful for women to multitask. So if one of our PMs, male or female, has little pockets of the day where they can just be present to their work and get it done, it's really good for their well-being. It reduces the exhaustion.
That's great. So I'm loving that. I'm like reducing the demand is one of the solutions, and then having block out time, which is what I would call block out time, which is something that I definitely encourage of my team. And I recently had an experience myself where I was in the office and I hadn't taken a lunch break. I was just like a pinball machine, going from one thing to the next. And I got home that night and my house was a mess. The kids had left their stuff everywhere. And I know, because I hadn't given myself any downtime or any space mentally, I was fried, and I felt like I hadn't been in control all day of what I was doing. And then my house I didn't feel like I was in control of and I lost it. I just absolutely blew my stack. The kids copped it. But I know, like, on reflection, I can go, you know what? That was a result of me not having some space or managing my time, being, in control of being very reactive instead of being in control. So I'm loving that. So is there any other advice or tips or strategies that you can also recommend on top of the 2 that you've already mentioned in terms of that well-being, that burnout, and that productivity piece? If you are anything like me, you think you know your rent roll numbers. Well, I thought I did, until I had a rent roll health check, and I was quite literally shocked. The money I was leaving on the table was astounding. And this is not something that I'm proud to admit. There were missed management fees, let fees, advertising, and lease renewal fees not being charged, and properties even without bonds. And all of this was happening despite monthly audits being conducted in my business. So how did I uncover all these gaps in my valuable income? Well, I had a rent roll due diligence from my good friend Tazi, aka the Rent Roll Queen and founder of the Tazi Way, a specialist in rent roll due diligence, business valuation and management rights. The Tazi Way is the innovative force driving the real estate industry. With 25 years of business and real estate acumen, they find gaps and risks in your agency to find undiscovered value. If you'd like to book your business in for a rent roll due diligence, head to the link in the show notes and mention That Property Mum for a 10% discount. If you're ready to be a super organised, focused and productive property manager, buckle up, because Colmio is about to revolutionise the way that you work. Colmio is the driving force behind property management excellence in residential real estate. Now picture this, a comprehensive end-to-end system designed to be the beating heart of your property management tasks, manage your properties, owners and tenants, and handle payments, inspections, and even marketing listings without leaving the platform. Colmio is designed to be an all-in-one solution to all your property management needs. And here's the game changer. Colmio isn't just software. It's been awarded the most innovative prop tech scale up in 2023. Yes, you heard it right. Colmio has been recognised for their groundbreaking approach to property management software. How good is that? So property managers, whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, dive into the future of property management with Colmio. You can book in a demo with the team today and go in their weekly draw for a Prezi gift card worth $100. All you need to do is to head to the link colmio.com/thatpropertymum, and Colmio is Kolmeo.
Yeah, look, I guess at the end of the day, that to pick up a thread on what you just said, that you reflected on what had happened and you were able to, I guess, take responsibility for what had happened, how you responded, and to track back and see that how it had arisen. And I guess, I'm speculating, but you were able to, because of that pragmatic reflection and ownership, that it was really that you lost it.
Lost my shit, yep.
It was no one else's fault, right? 100% on you, and therefore you were able to identify how you could avoid that in the future, or at least some strategies, right?
Yep.
So in many ways, that's actually the basis of continuous improvement. And I guess our philosophy is that change of any form is not possible unless you have self-awareness and unless you have ownership and take responsibility for the situation. So if you're not hitting metrics at work, you got to take responsibility for that yourself and not blame it on everything else and everyone else. Of course, there are things that happen that are out of our control, but the opportunity to reflect with the mindset of I am responsible for the outcomes that happened today, that I have created them in some way. When you reflect in that way and you're looking for the lessons, what happened, why, what could I have done better, but also what went well, how did I actually, because all these things happen that were beyond my control, of the responses that I did in my actions today, what was effective? These are all really powerful things to reflect on, leading to the next evolution of that thinking, which is, so what am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do next time I have a day like this? So we teach all of our clients, 100% of clients from all levels of work, whether they're a brand new PM all the way through to the owner of an agency, to embed that way of thinking into their life. And it starts with data. It starts with making sure you're measuring the right things. You've got to measure what matters to make sure that when you reflect, you're reflecting on what matters.
So what are the things that matter then? What is that data that we should be reflecting on? What matters for property managers?
Well, leaving aside the obvious things that relate to, rental arrears and all that sort of stuff, the things that people, let me just answer that with the things people don't really think about enough. So the psychosocial side of the experience of work is the one that jumps out for me. To what extent are you as a person integrating into your team, leaning on them for support, or is the team you're working with causing you angst and distress? To what extent are you as a person, is your well-being at least flat, if not being improved by the way you're organising your work, as opposed to your well-being is being diminished? So things like, so we have a software platform called Team Life, which we deploy for property managers, which allows them to track about 90 different things concurrently. It sounds really onerous, but what it really is designed to give them is things to talk about as a group, to work out how they can improve their experience of work, recognizing that the greatest experience of work, it's not just about minimizing stress. We also want to improve in it, and we also want to achieve things. The greatest job you're ever going to have in your life. I mean, if I ask you, Kylie, think of the greatest experience of work you've ever had in your life. Was there a high work volume in that?
Probably not, no.
Did you achieve things?
Yes. Yes, I'm an achiever. Yes, I like to achieve things. If I'm not achieving things, I'm bored, I'm procrastinating. Yeah. So yeah, you're right.
Did you find that you were growing as a person at that time?
Probably, yeah.
And this is very common,
Yep.
So the most motivating chains of things that all link together to create the greatest experiences of work during those times where we're united with a group, we have quite a high level of autonomy in terms of our role, in terms of choosing how we work, and we're also aware that work is challenging. However, we're aware within ourselves that we are mastering things, that we're growing, that we're getting better. So really, there's other things as well, but when you start to create situations where those types of experiences are what are coming through each day, and we're monitoring the right type of information, like psychosocial stressors, but not just to say, hey, boss of, head of the department, whatever, these are all of our problems, here's a shopping list. It's actually, we're doing that with a view to coming together as a team and fixing things, because it's our experience of work, not just what the boss enables. So we try to facilitate the data being available to all the people in the team, which we do through a whole bunch of different interventions that are all about changing the experience of work, creating an era where, my wish is that a decade from now, you'll be sitting in a cafe and you'll see someone walk across the road who worked with you now, and you'll just say to the person you're with, 1 second, you'll bolt outside and you'll just hug them, because they went through something with you that was extraordinary. That's the sort of era that we're looking to create. Why would you want anything less?
And property management is missing that. For me, my goal always in building a team in my business is I just want people to come to work, enjoy coming to work, do their job and go home and enjoy their life outside of work. And my business will provide them with that financial freedom. I don't want them to be stressed out. I don't want them to be miserable and chained to their work, their emails after, you know what I mean? I really do. I do envision that holistic approach to work, and where we're a genuine team where, my weaknesses are complemented by somebody else's strengths in the team, somebody else, and I do have a bit of a team happening at the moment where that is happening, but it's taken me 15 years to get there, and it's still a work in progress.
Sure. Yeah.
But I've had like, team and, employees have been my biggest challenge in business. And I know a lot of other business owners that I speak with, it's also their challenge as well. So I'm loving that you're finding the solution to these. The biggest struggle for business owners is their teams.
It
And
is.
yep,
And
you've got
they say our greatest asset is our team, but really, I mean, I challenge all the teams I work with. Why wouldn't we intentionally, as a group, all of us, create the greatest experience of work that any of us will ever have? Why wouldn't we? Because we're absolutely going to achieve things, but we're going to have an extraordinary time. And what I found, I guess I don't really share this with everyone, but it's part of the reason I do it, is that I guess how you do anything in life is how you do everything in life. So once you start getting the jigsaw right at work, inevitably the changes that happen to you as a person move out to your family life, to your life in the community. And I think that's really cool.
it is. It is. And that it's interesting that people think that it's the other way around, though, that you have to have everything else right and then your work will be a lot better. But what you're saying is that it's get
Goes
that
both
work
ways.
piece. Yeah.
Yeah. But, there's too much acceptance of being a victim in the world these days, that we want to blame every predicament, everything we can on some circumstance, as opposed to looking in the mirror. And so that's, we want to be cautious. Of course, there are things that happen outside our control, but realistically, life is probably 1% the things that happen to us, and it's 99% how we respond.
Yeah. I have a saying, it's happening for me, not to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you just can't see why yet. Doesn't matter.
Yep. I love
Just
that.
roll with it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm conscious of your time to get out of here because I obviously was late with the meeting today. But I just want to quickly get maybe just touch on two or three productivity tips for anybody, because that's something that I'm being little bit selfish here. It's something that I struggle with. I get very overwhelmed, and I find that when I'm in that state, I'm not very productive. And then then you spiral into that, I'm not good at this. All that sort of mindset stuff happens for me. And then I get into this real overwhelm. So do you have just a couple of quick tips that can help with
Sure.
productivity?
This is a pretty cool topic. So I'll try to give you a couple that are a little bit less obvious. Well, the first one, I guess, is fairly obvious. It's that the fact that you should, for at least 2 weeks, keep a journal and by your desk and write down everything you do during the day. And at the end of the day, sit back and look at it. Because everything is information. Reflect on things like, why did I do the things I did today in the order I did them? Which of these things gave me joy? For example, we've all heard of the eating a frog philosophy to life. And, what we know from that philosophy is that if we do the hardest things first, then they're out of the way, like eating the frog. However, if we procrastinate on eating the frog, which might be calling, an aggressive tenant or landlord, then we have this underlying level of anxiety and distraction that impairs us through the whole day until we make the call. And then as the day progresses, inevitably being the masters of procrastination, we'll seize upon any reason we can to not make the call, to push it back to the next day, in which case we've got interrupted sleep. So the reason you want to look at your data again is to look at why you're doing things in the order you are, what you're doing, what's taking up too much time. Ultimately, if you take your philosophy on organising your agency, Kylie, you're splitting people's roles. When you understand as their boss how long they're taking to do things, you can either target training or some other type of support around them. It may be that someone else is naturally much better at that type of task. so we can split the role a little bit. And, the things that the person over here is better at, they get more of those things. And the ones that the person who is bad at them gets, who doesn't like doing those type of things, possibly is better at other things, So it all comes down to having this information. I did talk a little bit about presence in that, and I think being present is one of the greatest gifts to ourselves that we can give ourselves. I find it really hard naturally to be present. And I remember when I first read about this, when I was learning meditation probably 20 years ago, I didn't even understand the concept. That's how non-present I was. But if you can learn strategies to become present through meditation, etc., these are extraordinarily effective in improving your productivity, but also in improving your well-being. We've got a great member of our team who is exceptional at teaching this and often does it for a lot of our clients as well. Runs meditation workshops, even coaching as well.
You've given us a lot of great tips and strategies as it is. So, yeah, and I think that's, I do a lot of journaling and a lot of reflecting, and it does definitely helps with my ADHD brain. And just on the meditation thing, I find, and I have realized that the more activated my nervous system is, the harder I find it. I try to meditate every day, but I find that the more activated I am, the harder it is for me to be present. I'm either thinking of the things that went wrong during the day, or I'm thinking of what I've got to do the next day. And but if I'm not as activated, and I guess the struggle for me is getting my nervous system less activated and less, because my natural state is to be in that, achieving, I guess, I don't know, that more busy masculine type of energy. And that is a real struggle for me. And I know a lot of other property managers experience the same thing, because you don't ever have a quiet day. You don't ever come into work and your inbox is empty. And I know a lot of other industries have that same thing, but there's always something that you've got to be doing.
I think the blockout time is probably a really good one for you. And also, I guess, taking micro breaks where you can actually just, brush off things, even if it's like connecting with nature for 2 or 3 minutes. If you can learn to do that via your feeling when you connect, as opposed to via your mind, that's what was the secret for me, actually, was because I also have a very, very busy mind. When I learned to connect with feeling, it didn't rely on my mind, which was busy, but it calmed my mind.
Oh, that's a good tip. I really like that. Now, we are seriously running out of time now. Stuart, what is some personal development tool, tip, strategy, or resource that you could share with somebody, apart from your amazing business?
Look, I think we've probably talked about it a little bit. That concept of journaling is really important, but so is setting a target. So when you're going to set yourself an objective, so what we encourage a lot of our clients to do, for example, is using the data that's come to them that week to identify a goal they can set themselves for the next 7 days. So we create this sequence of 7-day goals, which gives them and we also give them a forum to talk about those things with us and with other people in their team, to unpack what worked, what didn't work with their goal, and then to set another one for the next 7 days. Now, the reason we choose 7 days is it's short enough that you can make a real difference rapidly, but also it's not every single day, which can become overwhelming for people. So I would say to people, don't delay. Identify what's going to make you the best version of yourself, and set a goal to start doing at least one thing towards that by this time next week. And then find someone you can talk to about your progress, so you can talk about what worked, what didn't work.
Amazing. That's so good. And how can our audience connect with you further?
You can either jump on Facebook or come to our website, hdandu.com.au, hdandu.com.au.
And I will share that. I'll share all the links in the show notes, and I'll also share some of your, whatever you share with me in terms of your research and tools. I'll share those in the show notes.
We'll share a really cool case study with that organisation that I mentioned during the chat and what happened to them. It's quite a great story, so you'll enjoy that.
Amazing. Stuart, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed connecting with you today.
You too, Kylie. It's great to be on the show.
Thank you. Can I ask you a quick favour before you leave this episode? Now, we all know how important reviews are for businesses these days, and mine is no different. If you could spare just a minute to follow, rate and review this podcast, it would mean a lot to me. In fact, what would get me super excited is if you share this podcast with someone in the industry who you think might need to hear some of the episodes right now. And if you'd like to find out more about working with me or any of the products I have to help you start, grow or scale your property management business, head to my website, thatpropertymum.com.au, or check out the links in the show notes.